Recording the interview of Stephen Umland. This interview is being recorded by Ericka Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Holiday Inn, located at 2800 Presidential Drive in Dayton, Ohio. It is 9:50 a.m. on June 8th, 2019. How are you today?
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Where and when were you born?
Well, I was born in San Diego, California, on November 12th, 1949.
Oh, the Sunshine State.
Yes, San Diego was an unbelievably great place to grow up.
I was born in California, so I completely agree. Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My dad, Ed Umland, was a truck driver, and my mom, incredible lady, worked for the Pacific Bell Telephone Company.
What'd she do?
She started out as an operator, met my dad. He was going off to the Pacific to fight in World War II, and they got married 2 weeks before she graduated from high school. And she was supposed to go to college, but you weren't allowed back then to be a woman and be married and go to college with scholarships. So they took her scholarships away. So she started being a telephone operator, Pacific Bell Telephone, downtown San Diego. I believe that was 1944. And she retired from the telephone company 43 years later as one of the top executives.
Nice.
Yeah, incredible lady.
Let's see, okay. Did you have any siblings?
I had one older brother. He was 18 months older, Michael.
Okay. Did he serve in the military?
No, he actually tried to get into the military in 1968 and was turned down.
Can you tell us why?
I'd rather not.
Okay, that's a fair answer. What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was a truck driver. I was a rudderless, incredibly rudderless teenage kid. And I tried to go to college one semester. That didn't work out real well out of high school. And so I was driving a truck for San Diego Roofers Supply, and I walked off roofing material off on roofs all day long in San Diego.
Did you graduate from high school?
Yes, graduated Granite Hills High School in 1967.
Okay.
I was not a stellar student in high school.
Did you have any stellar activities that you participated in?
Football and wrestling and judo. I was, if it was athletics, I was all over it. If it had anything to do with math or geography, was not so good at it.
Okay. Okay. So, did truck driving suit you?
No, it's a good friend of mine, Art Floto. He's still a friend of mine. We met playing freshman football together in September of 1963. We're still the best friends ever. He looked at me one time, and I had my W-2, and my dad worked for the same company. And my dad in 1968 made like $210 more than I did the whole year. And Art looked at me and said, do you want to go for the next, 20 or 30 years of your life and make an extra $200? And the light bulb came on. I said, I got to do something else. My dad was a Marine in World War II in the Pacific, and so I went down and talked to a recruiter, and I said, I'm going to go in the Marines and be a Marine like my dad. I went home and told my dad I decided to enlist in the military. I was exempt from the draft because of a judo injury. And my dad looked at me and said, are you the stupidest person that's ever walked the face of the earth? There's this little thing called Vietnam going on. And he said, you're not going into the Marines. You're either going to go into the Navy or the Air Force. And I was not about to go into the Navy because in San Diego, the Navy guys stole all of our girlfriends in high school. And I said, okay, I'm going into the Air Force.
All right. And that probably ended up being a great choice for you.
it changed my entire life, and I can't possibly imagine what my life would have been like if I had not gone into the military. I was a rudderless kid that didn't know what he wanted to do. I thought I was stupid. The military taught me that I was smart, and the only thing I still laugh about the Air Force, because the first 2 years I grew up, turned me into a man, told me I was smart, and I was ready to get out of the military and get on with my life, but I signed up for 4 years, and I still had 2 years to go.
So 2 years, I'm good, I'm great. Oh, wait.
2 more years.
Okay. All right. So we're enlisted, off to war.
It's interesting because I went to basic training, and like I explained, I walked roofing material off onto roofs from trucks all day long. I was incredibly fit. I had these shoulders with a 28-inch waist, and I go into the military, and I go to basic training, and I was in worse shape coming out of basic training and gained weight. And so then, but I went up to Lowry Air Force Base, and I still to this day don't know how, because I did so poorly in school. I mean, I literally flunked classes, couldn't do anything. I'd take an aptitude test in the Air Force, and I scored on their aptitude test in the 90 percentiles. And so by scoring higher, you get to a career choice. So I remember them asking, what do you want to do? And I liked, I didn't know what Air Force intelligence was, but I said Air Intelligence, or what do they call that? Air traffic control. And so they sent me to Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado for air intelligence, which was a really difficult class, and an incredible amount of math. I couldn't do my checkbook when I went into the military, and here I am doing incredible stuff with air intelligence, aerial reconnaissance, and I just studied every night. I remember I went back to my room and I would just study every night. I was bound and determined I wasn't going to fail, because you had to go through a block, pass the block, go to the next block, pass it, and I was just bound and determined. And people washed out, and I wasn't going to do that. So then after that was over, when I graduated from Air Intelligence School in Denver, then of course I was off to Southeast Asia in the Vietnam War.
How long was Air Intelligence School?
You know, I was thinking I had to go in, and I remember that I was a fire guard because they couldn't get me into school right away. So coming out, and I went in April, so I was there May, June, and then so I remember sitting around shoveling coal into heaters to warm up the barracks at night. And I did that for, I think, 2 months. I got into Air Intelligence School, which I think was 2 months or 2.5 months long.
I mean, you said fire guard.
Yeah.
I thought in my head, I did not think you were shoveling coal.
It was funny because you learn in the military not to volunteer for anything.
Did you volunteer?
Yeah, I've been but what I did was I worked all night long, and I remember that everybody else would have to go out and do stuff. I would come back in the morning and go to bed. I remember one time somebody was doing an inspection, and they came through the barracks, and this guy came on and said, why is this man still in bed? And they said, well, he's a fire guard, which means that I shovel coal all night long into the burners to keep the barracks warm. So.
Oh, he left you alone.
They left me alone.
Mm-hmm. Should have left you a thank you note.
Yeah. So, and then, so when I graduated from school, then I got to go home, and I think I went home for 2 weeks. But this is end of October into November, and I believe my orders were on right around my birthday, November 12th. And then I was to report to Travis Air Force Base on the 24th of November, board the airplane, and we went to the Philippines. I believe we went to the Philippines, and then on to Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Vietnam, and then from Tan Son Nhut went to Bangkok, and then Bangkok, and I have a folder with all that stuff. My mom, she asked me to send pictures of when I was over there, so I sent her everything. So anytime I had a change of duty station or any of that kind of stuff, I just automatically, and my mom made a folder for me, which I still have, of all that paperwork. I have boarding passes from Bangkok to Nakhon Phanom.
Really?
In November of 1969. I remember when we landed in Tan Son Nhut, I remember saying, I'm not getting off the airplane. I do not want to get off the airplane in Vietnam. And, the war was going on. And so I stayed on and I remember when getting to Bangkok, the heat and the humidity was so oppressive. I remember going, where am I? So, by the way, my language can get kind of colorful sometimes, so I try to suppress that if that's okay with you.
I want you to be whoever you really are.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay? We'll just put a warning on it.
So, and then transferred up, went up to NKP, Nakhon Phanom. Didn't know anything about, and sat down and went to Task Force Alpha, not knowing that Task Force Alpha was this super secret place doing super secret stuff. We were working on a project called Igloo White, and I don't know if you know anything about Igloo White.
No idea, but neither do our listeners. Please do tell.
Igloo White was a super top secret project started on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and what they did was they had airplanes that would drop canisters that looked like missiles, bombs, short ones, and a tree would pop out. Not pop out, but it was already there, a tree. The majority of the projectile would go into the ground, and then the tree would be out, and the foliage in Southeast Asia was extreme, so you really couldn't see it. And it had sensors all over these things, and then there was a AWAC aircraft circling overhead of Laos and 24/7, and they would transmit that information back to Task Force Alpha, and they would guys all night long sit there, and these guys were so incredibly good. They could tell you if a truck drove past the sensor, they could tell you what gear it was in, how heavy it was, how fast it was going, and if there were troops walking by, they would be able to listen to the conversations.
And this was what year?
1969. And this was started in 1968 or late 1967. And what I get a kick out of it, I'm going to tell you this, about 2 months ago I'm sitting there watching the news, and they're talking about this new technology to catch migrating Mexicans coming over the southern border in Texas, and this new technology that they had devised, which was cameras and sensors and infrared and everything else. And they described it as this brand new technology that the U.S. government and the Border Patrol was using. We were doing this back in 1968 on the Ho Chi Minh Trail to monitor the North Vietnamese and in the path of Laos, moving material and men and weapons to fight against our soldiers in South Vietnam. And so what would happen is, and they called it strings. Say they have a string, there was a road, and if you think of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, everybody thinks it's one trail that came down. It was a vast, incredible network of roads that were hundreds and hundreds of miles, all through Laos, coming out of North Vietnam, coming down. And we would lay these strings down, these sensors, and sometimes some people think they were only 3. I remember them being 5, and you would monitor a truck or enemy traffic going down the road and would pick up the sensors, and you knew that 35 trucks went through these sensors because they only did it at night. Then, and the next sensor is 7 miles down the road, and those trucks never got to that next sensor. Then we would send out a reconnaissance mission, an F-4 reconnaissance plane, and they're there just to take photographs. And we would send out, and we would try to find those 35 trucks. And if we could find them, we would bomb them before they would move the next day. We got canisters of film in on my light table, and I would roll the film across, try to find my targets. Not very often. Sometimes we had color film, but it was almost all black and white. Sometimes we had infrared film to pick up heat sensors, and then we'd find a target. Usually I would tell the lieutenant or captain, and I've just met at this reunion I'm at right now, I met a captain who was over me that I don't ever even remember. And he didn't remember me until I showed him a picture of me back then, and he goes, "Oh, now I remember you." And we would explain to them, and then they would pull an extra 8x10 photo from the lab, and they would brief the pilots and try to send them out on missions to destroy these trucks and personnel and anything moving down the trail. During the day, we actually sometimes had photographs of men using bicycles. There were a tremendous amount of bicycles that moved thousands of pounds of rice down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was incredibly frustrating to have a mission where you would go up to the border, and they had stopped the bombing in North Vietnam, so they would stage the trucks and materials and equipment right across the border. And we had photographs of them staging, and we'd have to simply wait until they moved the vehicles and men and everything else across the border, which they would do at night. Kind of hard to take pictures at night, and we'd try to find them the next day or find them somewhere on the trail. And the work was incredibly interesting. And here I am. When I went in country, I just turned 20. I enlisted and went in when I was 19. And I loved the work. I just absolutely, and I was good at it, which was really. I'll give you an example of. I'll give you several examples, but I was going along, and I found some anti-aircraft weapon places, and we would always want to mark those off and be able to show them to the pilots, because we wanted to protect our pilots from anti-aircraft weapons, which they staged all over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. I looked at it and I said, this is right out of the textbook. I'd just come out of school in Lowry, and what you do is a PI, a photo interpreter, has a book, and you look and find something, and you go through a book, and you say, okay, this is a radar-controlled anti-aircraft battery, which is a central radar control that had ditches that would go out in a spoke to the anti-aircraft, and the radar would hone in on the aircraft going over and direct the firepower from all of these. And I look at it, there it is, textbook. Okay guys, we have a radar-controlled anti-aircraft battery on the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos. Well, by the way, Laos was neutral. Just want everybody to know that.
Are you being funny?
Little,
okay.
Just a little.
Okay.
And
I was gonna say several vets would disagree with you here. Okay.
And they came and said, no, there aren't any. There have never been a radar-controlled anti-aircraft thing on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And I go, guys, I just got out of school. This is textbook. Here it is. Take a and you. Whenever you found something, that you thought was interesting. Sometimes you just wanted to show somebody, hey, guys, you're not going to believe this. But a lot of times you'd say, hey, I need to have somebody else come over, look at this, and tell me you agree that this is what we're finding.
I'm not crazy.
Okay, take a look. And so I remember of course, we're enlisted, but we had master sergeants and tech sergeants and everything else, and they'd come over and they'd look, and the officers would get involved. When the officers got involved, it was they said, So they ended up saying, well, we're not going to report this because, and I'm brand new in the military, so I'm not getting the military thing yet. But they go, no, we're not going to report this because this has never happened before. But they're briefing this pilot, and one of the pilots on the OV-10s and the forward air control guys, and said, hey guys, we just want you to know we've had a report of a radar-controlled thing. And it was about a week later. The captain walked up and said, Steve, I just want to let you know that one of the FOQ guys was up on the pass, and he said, I think this is where they said that there was a radar, possibly a battery up here. He said, probably within 10 seconds of him thinking that, the entire world exploded about 20 to 30 yards in front of his aircraft. So this radar control battery had honed in on him, but the radar had miscalculated his speed. So when they tried to shoot him down, they were about 30 yards ahead of where he was at, and it was it's a nice affirmation that, hey, they,
high five you.
But we really worked really hard at trying to find and kill the enemy. We really I felt that by trying to stop the supplies, it would be helping our guys' boots on the ground. And
it did.
Yeah, unfortunately we ended up losing the war anyway, which is a whole different discussion. But they, how in the world could they have stopped bombing North Vietnam? I'll never been able to quite figure out. But it was a political war, not a military war, unfortunately. And I have a lot of regrets that I didn't. I just did my job, and I was really good at it. I was learning, I was growing as a man, and becoming confident. I never asked what we were doing over there or why. I never understood what the Vietnam War was about. I didn't know anything about the French, didn't know anything about the correlation between North Vietnam and China and the Soviet Union. Didn't understand the idea that the domino, we had to really stop the domino effect of communism. If you think about what Mao Zedong was doing in China in the 40s, and then what happened in the Soviet Union, and then all of a sudden now you're going into Southeast Asia, and you got North Vietnam, South Vietnam. They're going to take over Thailand, they're going to take over Cambodia. The Australians came in to help us out because they figured this is just going to go through the South Pacific, and so I understood that. But when I was there as a 20-year-old kid doing this job, I did not ever think about it. What am I really doing? Why am I here? What's the United States doing here, and why? We heard all kinds of really negative things back. Somebody would go on leave. They'd go to Hawaii or they'd go to Hong Kong. They'd meet up with their wife or whatever and come back. And you'd hear these incredible negative things that were happening in the United States with these Kent State. You can talk about all the demonstrations and everything else. And we didn't, we had nothing to go on. Nakhon Phanom, where I was stationed, we had no press because of the top secret stuff that was happening. I still get a kick out of Bob Hope. I saw the Bob Hope special in December, Christmas time in 1969. And he stood on stage and said, "This place is so top secret, they made the pilots put blindfolds on to get in here." I still laugh about that. But we didn't, I never thought about what we were doing in the big picture of why we were in Vietnam.
You mentioned you only did your job, and that, so I'm going to ask this question. What do you feel like you could have done more or something differently?
I was growing intellectually, and probably wasn't until 1971 or 72 when I got stationed at Hickam Air Force Base, started taking night classes at the University of Hawaii, started asking questions of myself and bigger picture questions. So it's not a matter of what I should have been a little bit more intellectually curious as to what we were doing and why. But back when I was 20 years old, 21, I was just wanted to do my job, go downtown, have fun, drink beer with the guys. I didn't smoke or drink or do anything before I went in the service. Thank God I didn't pick up smoking or drinking coffee. I don't drink coffee, drink Diet Pepsi. You know, I was just there to have fun and learn and grow. You know,
Okay.
Does that answer your question? But it's a tough one. So.
Okay. Do you think if you would have if you would have asked more questions, you would have been given answers?
Oh no, not in the war zone.
Okay.
You know, there's a whole mindset and blinders on when you're doing that. And the military has a certain way of just programming you. You know, and I'm not saying that's bad, right or wrong, or bad or anything, but they don't want you to be an individual. If you're in the military and you're doing a job, you want to be told what to do, when, and how, and not question it and do it.
Well,
The chain of command.
technically, being an individual gets somebody else killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
You know, and we were, and I'll tell this story. Well, I'll give you a little bit of background. I did that. I was actually at my light table. Phone rang, and the officer walked in and said, "Steve, there's somebody on the phone that wants you." And this is early October, September, October. The guy says, "Why aren't you here up at, you're rotating out? They want you at the 67th Reconnaissance Technical Squadron at Yokota Air Base in Japan, and you're supposed to get on a Freedom Bird in 2 hours." I was sitting at the light table doing my job, and I go, "I have no idea what you're talking about." I had been transferred and nobody had told me, and I was supposed to be with my duffel bag at the airport picking up the Freedom Bird that left NKP going to Bangkok and on my way. So they pushed everything back for 2 weeks, and I went up to Yokota Air Base at the 67th, and I didn't know that the 67th Reconnaissance was a very, very famous top secret place in Japan. And until I got up there and realized what they were doing. And the 67th was famous for doing air intelligence, reconnaissance all over eastern Russia, China, North Korea. We were still doing missions and running over Vietnam, North Vietnam, and that kind of stuff. And so, but we were the outfit that found the USS Pueblo, and we were running F4s and doing that kind of stuff in Laos and Vietnam. But when I went up to 67th, they were still running some U-2 missions, especially over Russia and China, but the SR-71 had just come into use. And the SR-71 was running out of Okinawa, and we were getting film and working on that kind of stuff. And that was interesting. I had just gotten to Yokota Air Base, and if you saw a picture of 67th, There was a parking lot, and there was an entrance, and there was a green door. You were not allowed to walk through the green door unless you worked there and had the thing. I remember walking up to the green door, going in and saying, I'm Sergeant Umland, and I've been transferred here. And the guy said, you don't walk through that green door. Somebody will come get you at the barracks and bring you through. So I went back to the barracks, and I don't know how many days. I still laugh about it. It was a couple of days I laid in my bunk till a guy came in and said, are you Sergeant Umland? I said, yes, I am. He says, why haven't you come over? I said, I did. I was told specifically I was not to walk through that green door without an escort, and somebody would come get me. I went, and I hadn't been there for very long, and I remember one of the guys I was young. I mean, here I am young doing this. One of the guys really ran me through my paces on camera work. And I remember one of the guys said, how'd he do? And the sergeant, tech sergeant, whoever he was, said, did it better than I do it. So it's kind of cool. But one of the things, and they asked me yesterday if I would tell the story of what we did with the Sante prison raid. And I didn't know about it when I was at Task Force Alpha, but as soon as I got to the 67th, one of the guys called me in.
Can you explain that? And for our listeners that don't know, just the Sante prison raid, like what was it, and then tell what you did?
Okay.
Okay.
Sante, we were Nixon and a bunch of the big top people decided they wanted to show the American people that they were trying to do something for the prisoner of war.
Okay.
So they wanted to get a massive raid that would go into North Vietnam, Rangers, SEALs, you name it, the top people, go in with helicopters, drop in to the prisoner of war camps, and pull out as many prisoners of war as they can. Are you aware of this? That this happened? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when I got there, they said, Steve, tell me what you think about the compound, the Sante, and somebody else was working on the Hanoi Hilton, and there was another one, I don't remember the other name. And so we looked at it, we all studied the film, and they didn't want to run too many missions over it because they felt that if they ran too many missions, they would catch on. Somebody's too interested in this place. So I would say, well, give me a film from 2 days ago, last week. And it was sketchy because I did that all the time when I was on the trail. I wanted to compare stuff and see what something looked like. And so I looked at it and looked at it and looked at it, and I went, I don't think there's any prisoners there. And I remember one of the captains going, oh yeah, they're there. Intel is telling us that they're there. And I said, I don't see them. And they said, well, they're in their cells. They don't let them out. You're not about to pick up these guys in the compound. So I started looking at grass. I started studying grass patterns. And the thing that I caught on was bicycles. The bicycles didn't change. If there would have been prisoners there, I believed that the camp guards would have been riding bicycles in and out on the bicycle. And I didn't see the bicycles changing. So I said, I don't think there's anybody there. And it was very sad. If you study what happened on the Sante prison raid, they went in and there were no prisoners there. And they didn't get a single prisoner out. Thankfully, there was nobody killed going in, but it was a massive, massive effort. I don't take any pride in saying that I called it right and everybody else called it wrong. It was just different analysis. And they did the same thing one time with me. They came in and said, Steve, would you look at the corner of this building in Hanoi and tell me if you think that there's an explosion, whether the explosion came from outside or inside. And I laughed because I said, I don't know what this building is, and I don't know why you're having me take a look at this building. And it was the Russian embassy in Hanoi. And there had been an explosion, and they were thinking that, and it was not uncommon for some of the pilots that were on missions over North Vietnam, they would save one bomb. And on their way back from their target, they would just kind of divert and go over Hanoi and drop a single bomb, and they weren't allowed to do that. And they thought there was a possibility that one of these had actually hit the Russian embassy in Hanoi. So we were trying to do photo analysis to find out if the bomb occurred inside or outside the thing. So anyway, we were doing very, very interesting work. I still laugh because my worst subject in high school was math. I couldn't do algebra, and could not do algebra. Flunked algebra 1, and
I agree. Numbers and letters don't go together.
Yeah.
Your ex left you, and I don't know why. Stop asking me.
And but we were doing like infrared stuff with the SR-71s and stuff with infrared, and the aircraft. If you have an aircraft, it's up and it's at a certain angle, and you're looking down, and the heat register is coming out of a tank. You can tell whether that tank is filling up or going down or doing whatever. It's all math, and I did it very well because I had a task. I can't do a formula, but I enjoyed that work very much. The 67th, when I went to Yokota, I did not like Japan. I'd been in Southeast Asia. I love Southeast Asia. I love the food. I love the Thai food. China, I just love the food. But Japan just didn't do it for me. But I was a big-time athlete in high school in football and wrestling and judo, and I did very, very well in judo. In fact, that judo injury on my left shoulder had actually made me exempt. They had to put pins in to put my shoulder back together when I was in high school. And so I started grabbing the train and going to the Kodokan. Kodokan in just out of Tokyo is where judo started. So I just went down and worked, and I started working out with the U.S. Olympic team in judo. And they decided that they were going to move the 67th Reconnaissance Technical Squadron out of Japan. And I have always had the impression, I don't know if it's true, that the Japanese government found out what we were doing behind the green door, and they didn't want us to be doing that on their soil. So they wanted us, and I had a captain who was the head of the U.S. Olympic team, was at the 67th, and I worked out with him, and he wanted me to stay and work out with for the 1972 Olympics. And I thought, here I am, a snot-nosed kid, 21. I would have just turned 22. And let me think. Do I want to stay in Japan, which is a place that I really don't really like, or do I want to go to Hawaii? So I went to Hawaii, and what a missed opportunity I had there. I look back on that, and the coach would not talk to me. I specifically missed the airplane going to the U.S. Olympic trials, and I wanted to go. I hadn't been home, and I wanted to go home, and so I looked back. But anyway, we went down to the 548th, got transferred to the 548th at Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii, and was doing the same thing. But we were doing some really interesting work down there. We were still running the SR-71s, which is an incredible aircraft with the technology out of Okinawa. But we were receiving the very first buckets from satellites. And they would put spy satellites up over Russia and China, and we were getting film in from them. They actually dropped the buckets out of the satellites over the Pacific Ocean by Hawaii. And they had C-130s with great big nets off the front of them, and they would catch the bucket. And if they missed the bucket, it would just simply go into the ocean and go to the ocean floor. And so they couldn't compromise the mission. We were seeing some really neat stuff. We were still doing Southeast Asia, but we were mostly doing stuff in China, and it's an interesting story that a lot of people don't know, is that the Chinese hated the United States. They had Taipei and the islands and all that kind of stuff from 1946 on. And we were watching, and the Chinese had nuclear warheads and they had nuclear capability, but they didn't have launch capabilities. They didn't have ICBM. We were watching them build the silos. And we were sitting there, I remember going back and forth, and somebody would ask, what do you think? And I went, well, I think it looks to me like it's going to be operational. And I would go into meetings and they would say, I think it's going to be operational, the ICBM launch pads, in maybe 3 or 4 months, and somewhere ahead of others, and we were watching them. And at the time, I had wanted to get off base, and I had gotten an apartment up by the University of Hawaii that was filled with college students, and my 2 roommates were 2 hippies, and I get a phone call, and we're on red alert, and they wanted to come in. We were running 12-hour shifts, and we were watching all this action go on. Russia was amassing a tremendous amount of troops on the border, and Brezhnev, pretty sure it's Brezhnev, called Nixon, said, we're watching them build the ICBMs. And he said, yeah, we are too. We're doing the same thing. And he said, we can't have China have nuclear launch capability, so we're going to do a massive raid and go in and destroy those. And they had tactical nuclear weapons staged on the border to go into China. Nixon hangs the phone up and he calls China, tells them what, and he goes, yeah, we're watching that. We know what's going on and everything else, and we don't care. We as a sovereign country, we have the right to have nuclear capability and launch. And so Nixon gets off the phone with him, calls Brezhnev back and goes, if you guys use and go in and go against China, it'll be an all-out third World War nuclear. We will back China. And if you remember, if you go back in the history, China hated us. And by Nixon saying, we'll back you and the 2 of us will be against Russia, and they invited Nixon to go walk. He and Pat went and walked on the wall. And that all happened, and nobody knew anything about it. And we were that close to all-out nuclear third world war. And so we did some really interesting work. So I was going to put a resume in. I was going to, like I told you before, first 2 years were great. Last 2 years I was going to the University of Hawaii and taking classes at night, and I wanted to move on with my life. But I put a resume into the CIA to go do this photo interpretation work for the CIA in Langley, Virginia. And I, in the meantime, had met my first wife. She was a student at the University of Hawaii, living in the same apartment building, and we were getting married. And I said, well, this is what I'm going to go do. And I still laugh. It was about a week before we got married, and she said, you're not allowed to tell anybody what you do. I said, no, I never will. She goes, we're getting married next week. Will you tell me then what you do when you go to work? I said, no, I will not. She goes, you're going to get up in the morning and go to work and come back, and you're never going to be able to tell me what you do. And I said, no, I'll never. It was all top secret stuff, So I still laugh about that. But I was ready to get out, so I put a resume into the CIA, and I was going to do it. And my first wife said, "You should go to the BX and buy a camera." Okay. You know, I was an audiophile. I loved music, and when I was in Japan, I bought all this top-end technical stereo equipment and stuff. And she said, "You ought to buy a camera." So I went and bought a camera at the BX. I bought a Nikon F, 2 lenses, 2 rolls of film, and a little developer kit. And I shot 2 rolls of black and white film, and went and processed it in the sink, put up towels and stuff, and you know, got everything dark and developed the film. And I went, I'm going to be a photographer.
Did you ever hear back from the CIA?
No, I've got a letter, which is in my folder. I've got a letter from them asking me when I got closer to when they thought the date would be to recontact them. They said, we're interested, you know, but, and because I don't know what the time lapse was, and I never got back to them. You know, I had to go through 2 or 3 different cipher locks to get into work, and I never saw a window. You know, and I thought, do I want to do this, or do I want to be a photographer and do my stuff?
That you can tell your wife about.
Yeah. So I got out because of the GI Bill. I went to Art Center. I went and traveled to all the different art schools, photography schools in the country. Picked Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles. I remember walking in that place and looking at the work that was on the walls and just was blown away. And so I got a degree in advertising photography and filmmaking, and had a phenomenal career for years and years and years and years. So that's what I did. Traveled all over the world, great clients and stuff. So that's not about Vietnam, or it's not about the war, but
we need to learn about you.
So had a phenomenal career. I had a small studio in Los Angeles and was starving to death, and got an assignment to shoot in Minneapolis, and went up and shot for 3 days in Minneapolis, fell in love with Minneapolis, and sold my house and studio in LA and moved, and had an incredible career. I was a gas and oil photographer. If you put gas or oil in it, I shot it. My clients were Harley Davidson, Winnebago, Mercury, Mariner, Porsche, Jaguar. You know, just it was just a great place. Minneapolis exploded about 3-4 years after I moved there. It became the mecca. Before then, you had to be in either LA or Chicago or New York to really do the top work. And Minneapolis broke the rules on that. And so it's great. One of my clients was Northwest Airlines. Flew all over the world shooting for them. And it was just, you know, it was... and then I closed my studio up. I bought some really nice land up on a beautiful lake in northern Wisconsin. Built my lake home up there, and then decided to close my studio up. I was doing an awful lot of location work, and I had a large studio with large overhead, and I went, why have the overhead if you're traveling most of the time? So I closed the studio up and talked to my clients, and they said, oh, we don't care. We don't care where you are. And we'll call you up and grab your cameras and go. And which I've been, you know, doing for 30 years plus. And it was so funny because just within 6 to 9 months after I moved up, the phone just went silent. And I went, I'm not sure this is working out right. But then I became a writer. I love construction. I designed and built my own full log home, and so I started photographing and reading up and doing research on building techniques, log homes, that kind of thing. And I would do stories, photo stories, and that's kind of how I ended my career doing that. Still do that a little bit, but the magazines in the United States are going downhill pretty quick. My favorite was Log Home, Cabin Life and Cabin Living, and Log Home Living magazine. Did some really neat stuff for them. my wife, Kathleen, love her so much. She kept coming up with ideas, and she would present ideas, and then I would have to do them. I found determined she didn't want me to retire. But,
Okay. Are you a part of any veterans organizations?
yes, the TLCB is the Thailand, Laos, Cambodia Brotherhood, and that's how all this occurred. When I was when I found something I thought was really interesting, I had the lab pull me an extra 8x10. If I had to brief a pilot on a mission or whatever, but when I found something I thought was really cool, I just have the lab pull me an extra 8x10, and I put them in a binder. At the end of the and this is all top secret, that I wasn't allowed to do this at all, and I never showed the binder to anybody. You never. And somebody asked me one day, and yeah, this is maybe 6 years ago, asked me, where were you stationed? And I said, and I thought, Nakhon Phanom, but I couldn't remember how to spell it. So I Googled it. And all of a sudden, when I Googled Nakhon Phanom, Task Force Alpha came up, Igloo White came up, all this stuff, and the TLCB, and the Thailand, Laos, Cambodia Brotherhood is an organization of us who was doing the top secret stuff in Cambodia and Laos. We weren't supposed to be there. It's all been declassified, and now we can talk about it. So I started scanning some of these photographs, putting them on thing, and started talking to the pilots and stuff that we had sent out on these missions. And so the guys with the TLCB are really incredible. And Texas Tech then found out that I had these photographs, and it's the Vietnam Archive. There's a museum down there at Texas Tech. They asked me to donate my binder of all these photographs, and I said sure. And I got some examples, which I'll send to you, of all these 82, and it's a way of talking. It's a way of touching bases with the guys that we did all this stuff with, and it's a great organization. I am a little bit of a member of the Vietnam group in Hayward, Wisconsin. They have meetings on Thursday mornings. I'm not real comfortable being around other veterans. I have found that most of them just want to sit around and bitch about our government, or what they don't get, or what they think they should have gotten, and I don't like being around. The military was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I got more back out of it. The United States of America doesn't owe me anything. I am incredibly proud that I served, and I got more out of it than anything. And so I tend to shy away. I will never go to a VFW ever in my life again. My mother used to go. I used to go for breakfast with her. She loved going to the VFW for breakfast in San Diego. And I got into an incredible confrontation one time with two Navy veterans who said that I wasn't a veteran, that Vietnam wasn't a real war. And they just really got in, really climbed all over me. And the stories are true, that they cautioned us when we were traveling, came back from Vietnam, that you wore civilian clothes. If you were going to San Francisco to catch a plane or whatever, don't wear your uniform because of all the anti-war stuff and everything else. So, and that stuff was true. And I felt like, the Vietnam veterans really didn't get recognized. We weren't, get mad at Nixon, get mad at McNamara, get mad at the politicians, Maxwell Taylor, General Taylor. I mean, those guys really did some really bad stuff, but don't put that on the veteran who was, and I wasn't boots on the ground, you know. And for 30 years, I didn't tell anybody I was a veteran. If somebody asked me, I would tell them, but I shied away only because I've become a member of the TLCB. I feel like I'm a veteran. They've made me feel like a veteran because I'm with other veterans talking about, we lost pilots, we lost men, we heavy hook, we lost people putting them boots on the ground there. But I felt like if you weren't a Marine or an Army with an M16 humping boots through a rice paddy, then you really weren't a Vietnam veteran. And with the group that's up in Hayward right now, I think it's interesting. They asked me to join and go in and ask for my veteran benefits and get registered as a veteran. So I said, no, I don't want to do that. They don't owe me anything. And they said, you're helping other veterans when you do that, because then you're in the system. And I said, that makes sense. So I went in and applied, and I was rejected as a Vietnam veteran because I served at Nakhon Phanom, which was in Thailand. It wasn't in Vietnam. And I just go, oh boy, guys. And I'm thinking about getting active and going to my congressman and writing him and saying, come on, guys. This secret war, which is what this secret war in Laos was all about, and many people died. We lost many people, air crews and everything else that went along with that. So I don't know how I got off on that tangent.
Yeah. The guys in Lebanon have been fighting for that right to call it a war also.
Yeah. I'm just, And I had one guy at the VA tell me that if I would have applied in the 70s, when I got out, either late 70s, maybe even into the early 80s, you were automatically considered a Vietnam veteran. But over the years, that's changed. How can that change? I find that amazing. So anyway,
Okay. What are some life lessons that you've learned from your military service?
Not to volunteer for anything. Life lessons. There's probably I think might be the number one thing would be that there's more than just you. When you're a part of an organization, camaraderie and with people, it's different than corporate America. When you're in the military, you're with other people. You have a common goal. It's not about me. When you think of the mission, think about what you're doing, and that's pretty something.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general since?
That's a tough one. I have an incredible amount of distrust of politics, of our political system. I love America. I love the United States of America, and whenever I traveled a lot, I would come back. I was always so happy to land at an airport. If you travel and stuff, and I believe that we have by far the best political system that's ever been created in the history of man. The freedoms that we have in this country that other countries just don't have. It's just an incredible place. But if you look back and study what Nixon and McNamara, and they lied, Lyndon Johnson, they looked and lied, looked right in the camera and lied to the American people, lied to the veterans, and lied to people who were going over there to fight in the war. So you become cynical when you, in retrospect, hindsight's always 20/20. When you look back and think about, I was just doing my job. I was just doing my duty, and I felt a lot of honor for doing that. In retrospect, if you go back and study them, Nixon and those guys, they knew they were going to lose. We were going to lose the war. How can you send a young man or woman into combat when you know that there's a good possibility they're going to get killed, or somebody next month or next 6 months? Or how can politicians go home and sit there and sleep and justify that? I don't understand. You know, if we're in a country and we're there, just like with Syria right now, with what our current president, they said, well, we're going to pull out of Syria. How can you go in and back a country and back a side in the civil war, and you've been doing that for the last couple of years, and then all of a sudden a politician says, oh, no, we're going to pull out. What have we done to all the soldiers and all the people that have sacrificed their life to be there and do that, and then just change your mind? Shouldn't you be smart enough to know? I look back and study. I've read a lot of books on Vietnam, and look back on what Kennedy inherited the Vietnam problem, and I think he was smart enough, and he wouldn't have been assassinated. I honestly believe he would have had us out of Vietnam, from what I've read. You know, he's assassinated. Lyndon Johnson comes in, and Lyndon Johnson escalates the war. Why did Lyndon Johnson escalate the war? He did it because it was in his best political interest, because there were so many companies in Texas that benefited. Hughes Aircraft, you just name the companies. It's all politics. You know, and I've seen the photographs, because I'm a photographer, and the photojournalist, the photographs of Lyndon Johnson, they said that he'd go down to the war room at night and sit and listen to the body counts coming in. He'd sit there and hang his head in his hands. They said he just like aged overnight, night after night, month after month. And how can you keep doing that? How can you keep sending people off to troops? How can you have a General Maxwell Taylor, sit there and say, give me another 250,000 guys and I'll have this mopped up in the next 6 months? Give him the 250,000 6 months down the line. Don't you think somebody should be accountable? You know, we don't have to be, as a country, we don't have to be the guys with the white hats all the time. But don't you think that we have smart enough people that should say, should we really be going and doing this? And if we should, we should. We have a right to protect our interests. We have a right to protect North and South Central America and NATO, our allies, all that stuff. But let's do it for the right reasons.
Absolutely. I have so many feelings about all the things that you just said. So many feelings, like Iraq and KBR.
Oh.
Right? Like, I have so many feelings, and I can just relate on my combat, right? Like, all of what you said, it hasn't changed. It just changed generations. So I just...
The players changed.
Right.
That's all. I mean, why in the world did Bush put us into Iraq?
KBR.
I know.
Right. Yeah. So. And
it had nothing, 100% nothing to do with 9/11. Had nothing to do with Al Qaeda. You know, and they knew this. Weapons of mass destruction. I'm sorry.
Where?
I was in intelligence.
Where? So I'm having my own feelings, but okay. Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
Oh, I could go on for my wife. I laugh, Kathleen. She says, "Okay, Steve, land the plane." Because with my friends, I just I literally could go for another hour.
Okay.
But you know, I've loved my life. I've had an incredibly interesting life, and been able to see and experience some wonderful things. You know, and I love this country.
What message would you like to leave for future generations that will see or hear this interview?
We have the best political system in the world. We have our Constitution gives Americans, individual Americans, the rights and freedoms that no other group of people have ever had. You've got to, if you honor that and honor what our Constitution really was about, you know, in the 1700s, early 1800s, and how it evolved, that you should treasure that, safeguard that, protect it, protect the rights. If you go back and study history and see how we evolved as a political system in a country, don't let anybody take that away from you. Don't let anybody change that. It's too, we have it too good to let it go. And the pendulum is swinging, and I've said that to many people. I believe if you don't like our current administration or a particular administration that was in and what they did, we have checks and balances in this country that no other country has, and protect those, honor them, and use them, and change. And if you don't like what's going on, get involved and change the system. Change and make it better for what you need. You know, who was it? Thomas Jefferson said they were trying to come up with the Constitution. He said, you know, the only thing that I see that I'm really worried about is that if a big group of people get together and start a political movement as a group, we don't have any checks and balances. Back then when they did that, we had no parties. We didn't have Republicans or Democrats. We didn't have lobby groups and everything else. So, you know, and he says, we see that, developing the Constitution, we see that, but by giving the rights and freedoms we have in the Constitution, we're almost making that inevitable, which is exactly what's happened. So,
Definitely proud to be an American.
Just unbelievable.
That concludes our interview with Stephen Umland. Thank you so much for your time today and for your amazing military service.
Thank you. It was my honor.